5 o'clock, I'll call a meeting of the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors to order at this time. And please rise for the invocation by Tim Sackett.
Good afternoon and hello again. And I always enjoy being here. I have to share this space with some of the other clergy in our area, and often I don't want to because I like being here. But I do anyway. So I asked a question on the way in if these meetings have been running a really long time each month, and I thought, you know, maybe I should give somewhat of the old blessing that says, may the ground beneath your feet be cool and the wind be at your back, and may all your meetings be short, or something like that. So that's the blessing for today. You know, I picked something up a couple of days ago in preparation for this, and this is going to be very brief, I promise, from a magazine article that says, fear, insecurity, anger, grief. And so I thought, okay, the question is, am I reading from a current magazine or something that's from a long time ago? And the answer is, it's from September 2001. In a couple of days, our nation's going to gather together. And everybody's going to be participating or leading or thinking or praying or talking or discussing something about where they were and what they were doing and what happened 20 years ago. And so this article is actually 20 years old from a magazine that said, fear, insecurity, anger, grief. And I thought, man, we could pick this magazine up just about any decade in this world and read these words. But then it says later on in the article, it says, many sought solace in their faith or acts of patriotism and solidarity with the victims of the terror attacks. Churches throughout the city, Washington, D.C., it's describing, filled for the evening prayer vigils. And I thought, man, if only they were still full every night for prayer vigils. Then everywhere flags. A large American flag was unfurled against the scarred walls of the Pentagon. Along residential streets, homeowners hoisted the stars and stripes. At a news conference on the steps of the Capitol steps Tuesday evening, dozens of legislators spontaneously began singing, God Bless America, and some onlookers openly wept. And I thought, sometimes it takes the worst that happens to bring out some of our most humble feelings of humility and vulnerability. But then pride takes over, and we start seeing flags and patriotism and love for country and pride in our country, and that's not all that bad. But the Bible reminds us that pride, and this is a false sense of your own security, pride in a biblical term is confidence with arrogance. You know, the nastier, the better my arrogance in my own confidence leads to a haughty, prideful spirit. And that, in our own personal lives, brings a fall into a destructive. Pride goes before destruction, it actually says in Proverbs 16. So faith, as it says in here, that many turn to their faith. Faith is not the lack of confidence. It is part of the fabric. And so I want to be here to inspire your faith, both in the Lord and in our country, especially for the things that we've been going through and we will continue to go through. So let's pray. Almighty God, we are thankful for a nation that has risen from the ashes of 20 years ago. We are thankful for the ability to continue to live in the land of opportunity, into the land of freedom, into the land of tomorrow. There's always a tomorrow for us. But we are reminded by your words in the Scripture that today has as much trouble as we can handle, and we don't even have to worry about tomorrow. All we have is this day right now. That takes away our arrogance. It makes us dependable upon you. And I thank you, Lord, that you said that you would be with us always. And so, Lord, I want to inspire the faith of everyone in this room, everybody on this board, and all that they represent. And I pray that our faith in you would return and be inspired, and that we would have confidence in our faith because we have confidence in you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you. Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Please complete the roll call. Guess we have.
Dan?
Supervisor Ard. Got them all, I believe. Okay, thank you. Next will be public comment, and if you wish to comment tonight on anything other than the hearing coming up later, now is the time. Otherwise, please wait for the hearing on the redistricting. First one I have is, and we'll allow 2 minutes per comment tonight. First one I have is from Roy Soberg. Roy?
Hello, everybody. I'm proud to wear this wonderful T-shirt. It's part of the CASA program that the county's supporting. A couple years ago, this county board committed $50,000 to help us launch. And we're now off the ground. So I'm really excited about that, and so are all the judges, I'm sure, because CASA is aimed to give them guidance, give the judges guidance on what's happening to the foster kids, trying to find a long-term permanent home for them. So I just wanted to invite any of you that wanted to come and see my presentation. I am the current president, and I'm so proud that we're about to hire an executive director. So that should happen this month. Hopefully we'll make an announcement the first week of October. So that's a real exciting thing, but the next week's CJCC meeting, I will be providing about a 20-minute presentation on CASA, what it is, what it's aimed to do, and what we're going to try to do here in St. Croix County. So again, thank you for your support in the past and hopefully continuing support into the future. And thanks again.
Thank you, Roy. Does anyone else wish to make public comment? One more time, does anybody else wish to make public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda, and we'll vote on that at this time, unless there's a request to separate. Okay. Motion to bring it forward. Supervisor Asnes. And the second, Supervisor Hampson, thank you. And any, I guess there's no discussion, so we'll vote at this time. Carries, thank you. Next will be the presentations, recognitions. We have a 2020 audit report. We're going to proceed with that.
Yep, we have our auditors here this evening, so Jonathan?
All right, thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Jonathan Sherwood. I'm a manager with Clifton Larson Allen. I'm the manager that's in charge of the field work and the preparation of the financial statements. With me tonight also is Brock Guyan, who's the principal of the audit, who signs the engagement and officially issues our audit opinion. So for tonight's discussion, I've already presented the audit summary to the admin committee at last month's admin committee meeting. So I will be referring to the 5-page handout summary again, and just keeping my comments fairly high level for you as well. But if any times anybody has any questions or comments for you or for me, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to address them the best I can right now. So to kick things off here, I guess, I've got the audit summary here. I guess it's going to be coming up on the screens here shortly. So as I'm looking around, I don't think anybody actually has the handouts in front of them, so bear with me a minute. I just want to recognize all the rest of the department heads, the various staff that we have to deal with during preparation of our audit. A lot of time, effort goes in on their part as well, just to get us all the information that we need in order to prepare the financial statements and actually issue our opinions. So thank you very much to all the department heads and all the various staff that we deal with. Sometimes we can be a little bit of a nuisance, but we appreciate it. Obviously, we had to deal with some continuing issues with COVID, working remotely at times, working with staff that weren't necessarily in the office. So appreciate that as well. So it sounds like it's in the packet as well, or should I just?
Yeah, if you give us just a second, we're having the lectern PC isn't displaying on there, but the county clerk, I think, is going to bring it up on her computer, and then she'll switch back to that display.
Okay. While we're waiting for that, there's some items I can at least address and just keep my presentation moving here, so I'm not up here that long for you tonight. One of the first things that we highlight for us is on page 1 underneath the audit opinion, as soon as we can get caught up here a little bit. Our audit opinion, we issue what's known as a clean opinion or an unmodified opinion. It's the highest level of assurance that an independent auditor can issue over the financial statements, over the amounts and the disclosures of the financial statements. So that's what we strive to do, so happy to report we're able to issue that audit opinion again this year. There is additional information contained in this year's audit that addresses what's known as GASB 84. So just so if you do compare this year's audit report to last year's audit report, you'll notice that there's some verbiage changes and a few new schedules in there, that just some various changes we had to implement for 2020. Going over some of the internal controls, we also issue a report over internal controls of the county. During our examination of the internal controls, we just basically look to see what the county has in place, how they're operating, and if there's any items that need to be, that raise to the attention that need to be brought up here at the county board meeting. And this year we actually have 3 items to report under the material weaknesses section there. You can see 2 of them are repeat findings from last year, so you should be familiar with those wording. 1 of them is new, again, for this year, and I'll explain that one a little bit further. So the first being material audit adjustments. That just simply means that during the course of our audit work, in order for us, CLA, to compile and issue your financial statements, we had to propose adjustments to the books that had a material impact that made a large enough difference that, again, needed to be brought up and discussed here tonight. So this is a repeat finding from last year. So during the 2019 audit, we actually made about 46 journal entries, and we're down to 36 journal entries in 2020. Not necessarily, this finding wouldn't go away if we reduce this all the way down even to 1, because it does actually have an impact of the value or the magnitude of the correction. So we are making progress in some respects, that we're reducing the number of journal entries that we need to propose, but the magnitude of those entries is still to the level where we're reporting the finding again this year. The second item that we have for you is the limited segregation of duties. Again, we're making progress in this area as well across all the various departments of the county. It needs to be segregations of duties from the very, very small departments all the way up to finance in total. And obviously within the finance department, you did have quite some substantial turnover in finance as well, that some of those challenges that kind of hindered our progress there in 2020. But I know that steps are being made to add additional corrections to this finding. So still a work in progress on this one. We can obviously reevaluate these annually to see if there's any of these we can be eliminating. The third item that we have for you is, again, it's a new item that we haven't reported here in the past, but it did raise to a level that we needed to actually issue it for you this year. It's a reconciliation of the fixed assets of the county. So again, in your budgeting processes and, knowing what we're purchasing, that all of that is on par, it's fine. When we actually get up to the audit level, we actually take and analyze those expenditures at the fund level and then bring them into what's known as the entity-wide statements of the county. And that's one of those items that we have to analyze in a little bit different way. It's kind of outside the scope of the normal day-to-day business of county budgeting and paying expenditures and that like. But the additional work that we had to do in order to get your fixed asset records in line, it was, more than what we've had to do in the past, and it raised to a level that we needed to make sure that, again, that we let the rest of the county board know that this was an issue for us to prepare the 2020 audit. We've taken steps, and there's been conversations between us as well as finance and some of the other various department heads that had some of that additional work needed. So those actions have already been put into place for 2021, and our hope is that obviously during the 2021 audit, we would be able to for sure eliminate this comment. So it was an issue in 2020. We've already put into steps in order to eliminate this finding in 2021. And we will hopefully be able to remove this at next year's audit. We also issue a compliance and internal controls over compliance report that has to deal with your single audit, is what we refer to that as. It takes a look at all of the federal and state funding that comes into the county, and to make sure that all of that funding is being appropriately spent and applied correctly to those programs. And we're happy to report at this point there's been no findings that we needed to report over that examination. So happy to report that, no real issues there. Some of the other items that we do issue as well is under the nursing home. That is a standalone or a separate audit. So we issue that separately because that's got some other requirements that are required in order for us to issue nursing home reports. So that's also been given an unmodified or clean opinion as well. Just wanted to make you aware of that. That is its own separate document. There are a few other items that we prepare alongside, not just doing the audit, but some other items that we take care of for you as well. It's the unaudited financial report form. It's a couple of filings with the Department of Revenue that we have to do. You can see the filing deadlines for there. All of those filings have been made and have already been submitted for you. So to dive into some of the actual financial data here on page 2, I'll start off with the general fund. And again, I'm going to keep my comments very high level, so I'm going to skip all the way down to the 3 highlighted shaded rows there for us. Long story short, when looking at a governmental entity, a county, we look at these 3 measures basically to say, what is the financial health of a county? How well are we doing in one year versus the next? The first thing being, what is my unassigned fund balance number? What does that number really represent? So that is the true unreserved it's the true unreserved equity or fund balance that you can, used for the true reserves of the county that can be used in future periods for unbudgeted items or for some additional items that you just need to maybe possibly tap into. So we take that number, we compare it to what your total operating expenditures of the general fund, what does it take to run the government for the entire year? So that's that second shaded line down there for you. And we develop this ratio. So essentially in our true reserves of the county, how long could we basically fund county operations without needing to take any tax dollars in or do any other additional borrowing or anything? So we compute a ratio of about 47%. So what does that really mean is basically we could essentially run the government activities out of the general fund for almost half a year without taking taxpayer tax levy into it or issuing any debt, just to run the general nuts and bolts of the county. So when you're looking at that, what does that really mean ultimately? We take a look at what the county fund balance policy is going back a number of years, how it was actually adopted, what is our target for St. Croix County. And the current fund balance policy is 35%, is you want that to be a minimum for your internal policy. From an outside audit perspective, what we like to see or basically look for is anything that's about 33% is what we would say is financially healthy. 1/3 of your operations essentially could be funded. So for things like a global pandemic and maybe needing to respond and be a little bit nimble for additional expenditures would be able to be funded out of your true reserve number. So you can see that you are definitely meeting your policy. You're at 47%, and your policy is 35%. From an independent auditor, we're saying it's about 33%. So definitely exceeding that. So then the next kind of point of comparison is how are you doing compared to the rest of your cohorts in Northwest Wisconsin. So of all of the Northwest Wisconsin counties, we do a significant number of them, so we're able to kind of compare and see where one county lies to the next. From the Northwest Wisconsin average, we're about 48 to 50% of unassigned fund balance. So you're right in that range. You're right at that target level of what everybody else in the area is. And this number, excuse me, has definitely ticked up in the last number of years, especially actually during 2020. It seems kind of counterintuitive that your unassigned fund balance number goes up during the impact of COVID. However, most counties took the same approach where they reduced general fund expenditures where they could and kind of controlled some of that spending. And then at the very end of 2020, there's a lot of federal funding that came in to the county levels. So not only are your expenditures down, but your revenues are up, which then basically impacts and increases your unassigned fund balance that you're seeing here. So all that being said, I'm not going to, from an independent auditor standpoint, say 47% is extremely healthy or extravagant to any means. You're right within your peer group of Northwest Wisconsin. You're financially healthy. Some of the benefits of being at this level would be increasing cash flows, so you don't have to rely on short-term borrowing needs, which some other governmental entities would potentially need to do throughout the year. It definitely is positive impact to any bond rating, so any future borrowing needs would actually be improved upon having good reserves here for you. And then lastly, you're then internally able to finance capital projects a little bit more liquid, finance some of that internally versus needing to go out and borrow for that. Also of note, in your total expenses in there that you're seeing of that $41.6 million, that also does include, I believe, some transfers that were made to other funds here to help finance other activities of the government, which I can highlight for you here in just a second as well. So moving on, page 3. Next items here are the special revenue funds. So these are activities that are tracked separately. They're reported separately in your financial statements, and the revenue sources are restricted for a specific use. So it's either a specific state or federal grant that's going into these, or some donations from an outside organization went in here, and they're just being tracked for those purposes. So the biggest one out there is Health and Human Services Fund, and we present a 4-year average here, our trend analysis here, so you can see kind of where these activities have gone from one year to the next. And really, when it comes to human services, the nice thing that you can see here is in 2020, you've got your true reserves, and this is just your fund balance or your equity at the end of the year, is at $2.6 million, and that has steadily increased since 2017. Again, if you look at the Northwest Wisconsin averages of health and human services activities, that is definitely not the norm. The vast majority of them kind of have this seesaw effect. One year they're very profitable, maybe the next they're need a significant influx from the general fund. So if you can see here, your operations of health and human services has actually been fairly steady and has been increasing. So that's a positive sign for you. You can definitely see the current year change here. Obviously, it's the same type of story I'll repeat here a few times for you of the impact of COVID. Like I said, it is kind of counterintuitive. You controlled your expenditures where you were able to, and then that additional funding at the end of the year is really the main driver of why you have a current year change there of about $854,000 for the year. So that's definitely the driving factor there. Under the other special revenue funds, an item just to point out there for you, in the 2017 column, you see you've got a couple of balances that are still reported over there, and then as we move forward to the 2018 column, they just disappear. Those activities didn't cease by any means. As a reminder, the 2018 column shows the switch into the new financial management system, the new ERP system. So those activities were just folded into health and human services. And then, as well as it's a similar story down towards the bottom of that section where there's no activity in 17, and all of a sudden you've got activity starting in 2018. So we've got a 3-year trend on some of those activities just because we started tracking things just a little bit differently at this level. Nothing really for me to really point out besides maybe the Stop Drugs Fund there. You can notice that actually is showing up as a negative there for you, which basically does mean that your expenses in that activity exceeded the revenue that was brought in to offset those expenses. Well, that specific activity is 100% funded by donations. So you can definitely chalk that up to COVID having a dramatic impact of either that activity not even happening at its full capacity. So definitely donations were significantly down in 2020 as compared to prior years. So really the only thing there is to make management, finance aware of that. They are aware that that activity is being tracked right there. They're aware of the budget year-to-date reports so that they can keep an eye on that and see if maybe the donations, maybe additional donation activity needs to go out and be brought in, or potentially reduce expenditures going forward. All in all, if that activity does cease, it would be required to have a transfer in from the general fund to cover any deficit there in order to close out those operations, if that would be decided down the road. Moving on to item number 3 here under your capital projects fund. Again, 2017, we were tracking things much differently than what is being reported here now in 2020. Basically, all of those activities over the 2017 column basically did get rolled into the capital projects fund, with the exception of the St. Croix River Crossing project, which obviously completed during 2019. That's why there's zero reserves there left over in 2020. That whole project now has been closed out, so for tracking purposes, it's all within this one capital projects fund. So you can see here at the end of 2020, your capital projects fund has in its reserves $7.8 million there that was set aside and used for future capital projects funds. And I know that there is a KIP plan out there that basically says this is what we're going to use, and that is updated very regularly. During 2020, some of the major items that were completed out of there were, the parking lot refinishing was done, some improvements to the courtrooms for sure, and various IT projects for COVID-related purchases there. And then the last item, the major item, was the completion of the highway building. So all of that, that's the explanation why in 2019 it went from $14 million down to about $7.8 million left. So a significant drawdown there, specifically due to the completion of the highway building. Item number 4 are your debt service funds. Again, here in 2017, we were tracking debt service funds by individual issuance, which wasn't necessarily required by any means. So that was all rolled into one line in 2018, the debt service funds. So just some things here. I mean, you've been meeting, the county has been meeting its legally obligated principal and interest payments. The reserves here at the end of the year of $323,000 are restricted and reserved and will be used to meet future debt service requirements, principal and interest payments in future periods. In 2019, you paid roughly about $8 million in principal and interest. In 2020, that number came down a little bit to about $6.2 million in principal and interest was made and actually paid out during 2020. Again, that $323,000 will be used in the future to pay off existing debt. There is no new debt that was taken out during the year. I'll say that in air quotes for right now because it's not any additional debt. There was a debt issuance, I'll highlight that later, but that was a refinancing activity to pay off some existing debt to have a more favorable interest rate and repayment terms. Switching gears a little bit, going into page 4 here, we start having discussions on the enterprise funds, also known as business type activities. So in here, you're going to see some additional items that you weren't seeing reported in your governmental activities due to the required accounting treatment of things. So some things just that will look differently for you, specifically on the balance sheet summary here for you. You are going to see the WRS pension asset, capital assets, long-term debt are going to be showing up directly here on your balance sheet. You weren't seeing those items elsewhere. So that is going to directly relate down to, I'll jump all the way down to the operational results, the current year change in net position there for us. So it is showing for the healthcare campus, for the nursing home activities, there is a net change before transfers and levies. So it is showing and reporting a $440,000 loss. So included in there are some of those items that are saying we don't report them the same way for the governmental activities. One being depreciation expense. That's just a non-cash transaction. It is a true expense of the healthcare campus activities, but that's a non-cash item for the year, as well as the WRS pension expense in order to adjust that within these statements. Those two items by themselves are expenses that are about $608,000 for the year. So that will directly offset the total change in net position, which basically results, you had an operating income for the year, or an operating gain from operations. So that's very promising to see. We've had that continued trend now for the last number of years. Obviously with the building of the new building, that's the main driver of why you have such a large depreciation expense item on your books every year, is because that's now starting to age out and we're starting to depreciate those assets a little quicker. Hence the reason that we're showing a total change in net position to be negative for you. Moving on from there, page 5, we've got the highway department. Again, this is also a business type activity. Similar type story there for you. Kind of jumping down about a quarter of the way down the page for us is the change in net position line that we see there, showing a change in net position of $1.6 million. That also does have depreciation expense and that WRS item in there that is a direct offset of revenues. So that is actually a little bit higher. I don't have that number in front of me. So, sorry, operating income I see at $988,000 is what we're showing there. The reason that number, 988,000, is less than the 1.6 that you're showing is there's a capital contribution of about $1 million, and that came from the capital contribution from the state as well as from the general fund for the final completion of the highway building is what that number represents. There was also an offsetting gain on sale. We sold the old highway building, and then the proceeds of that sale then did get transferred out to that capital projects fund. As a refresher, or maybe just so everybody kind of remembers that activity, when we sold the old highway building, it being a highway asset, we transferred the proceeds over to the capital improvement fund, capital projects fund, who then basically financed the construction of the new to help offset those costs. So that activity was also highlighted in that balance there for you. Moving down to the internal service funds, so these are just various activities that are tracked separately and they're treated very similar to a business type activity. They're internal services for, they're all maintained in their own separate funds, but it's for internal purposes only that control the costs and are spread across the rest of the departments. So those activities here, your liability insurance fund, health insurance fund, workers' comp, retirement, and the county fleet fund is what you have outstanding at the end of the year. And when we look at these types of funds, we basically, again, look at a trend, and we're looking at a 4-year trend. Essentially, are the charges that we're establishing and we're charging ourselves or the various departments, are those actually meeting the actual costs we're incurring at the county level? Making sure that the health insurance fund that we're charging to our workers and the employer contribution, is that meeting what the actual premiums are? And I know that these funds are definitely looked at during budget time. I'm sure you'll have a lot more discussions when we're talking 2022 rates and whatnot that are going to be set here shortly. So you can see the decrease in those in that fund, in the health insurance fund specifically, I know for a fact was a deliberate move. We at the county board level intentionally set our rates in such a way in order to have a little bit of a drawdown in your health insurance fund during 2020. The only other major item that you're going to see there is the health retirement liability account, or health liability fund was actually closed during the year, and those reserves then were actually folded into the retirement health savings fund. So that's where that activity is now being tracked. Item number 7 here, the last item that I'll have for you, is the long-term obligations. So these are the total long-term obligations for the county, for countywide. You've got up on top here your general obligation bonds and obligation notes. Again, your typical premiums, principals and interest payments that you need to make from one year to the next. There was no new overall debt that was issued during the year, but again, you did have a debt issuance. That's why you can look at your general obligation notes line and see that number increased. Well, that number increased in order to pay off some of your general obligation bonds, helped to reduce that top line number there for you. Other item just to make you aware of, just to let you know that no, it is in fact not a typo, is the WRS pension asset liability line. You can see there's a negative number on a liability account, which basically means it's an asset, right? So this is an asset on our books of about $7.2 million. This is not an asset that the county can go out and spend or do anything with. This is simply a financial reporting mechanism. We are a participant in the WRS system, the statewide system. In Wisconsin's WRS system is extremely well funded, and in this fact, in 2020, it's actually overfunded. So I think the number was 102% funded. So this is the county's share in total of the asset that's on the books down at the system at large. So it is $7.2 million, but unfortunately, from the county level, we can't go and spend that on other pet projects we might have out there, or some hopes and dreams that we have down the road. So the last number that I'll highlight here for you is the general obligation debt as a percentage of the debt limitation number, the very bottom ratio. It's 10.3%, which basically means that of the state limit of the total debt you can issue, the county is using only 10.3% of that legal debt limit. At a county level, it's not very feasible that you're ever going to approach 80 to 90% of that level, so you're never going to get into the option of not being able to physically go out and issue more debt. However, the higher that you increase this number, the greater you'd have to raise taxes in order to meet your principal and interest payments. So typically, I'm going to see a highly leveraged county, 25, 30%. And that would be only if you have a very major, extreme borrowing need for a capital project going forward. So other than that, 10.3%, you've got plenty of debt room if the need should arise, but no real comments, further comments for you when it comes to meeting your debt obligations. Other than that, that concludes my comments for you this evening. Are there any questions or anything I could potentially address for you this evening?
See none, apparently, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next would be the financial report. Ken?
Instead of boring you with any more numbers, the revenues are at 55.3 million through the end of July, and expenses are at 53.8 million, so we are right on target. I would entertain any questions you might have, but nothing to report is good news.
Questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you, Ken. We'll move on then to the public hearing and on the tentative county supervisory district plan, and at this time I will open the hearing for comments or questions. Any public comments at this time? Okay, seeing no comments, I will close the hearing at this time, and we'll move on then to the business items, and the first one will be the resolution adopting the tentative county supervisory plan. Do I have a motion to bring that forward? Supervisor Long?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second? Supervisor Osnes. And comments? Questions, or Ken, did you want to address it first?
Yeah, we have Brett in the back if
Sure.
you want him to make any presentation on it.
Yeah, if you would just give us, I assume the board would like a high-level overview on it there. Go ahead.
Good evening. Cindy, do you have that? Okay. I can't run it from here. Is that okay? Yeah. So this presentation that's in your packet is the same presentation that provided to the administration committee a couple of weeks ago about the redistricting process. So why redistricting? Equal representation. That's what we're about. The St. Croix County 2020 population was 93,536. So the county grew by 9,190 people, which is a 10.9% increase. So we need to accommodate that increase in population in the districts. There's a map here showing the population change by percent across the county. You can see the fastest growing municipalities were Hudson, town of Troy, River Falls, Roberts grew fast, town of Richmond, New Richmond, and then Hammond. And then we actually decreased or stayed pretty much the same in population from Aaron Prairie, Emerald, Glenwood, and the town of Rush River, and the village of Hammond pretty much stayed the same in population. So again, why redistricting? We have this increase in population, 9,100 people. Essentially, we have 19 county board districts. In 2010, each district represented 4,439 people. This year, 10 years later, it's going to be 4,923 people, an increase of 484 people per district. This is your district map from the 2011 Supervisory District with the 2020 population. And if you can see that, what that's showing is that, say, the southerly district in the city of Hudson is over the population by some 40%. Yes, okay. So you are representing many more people than, say, the northeast districts are representing. So your citizens are being underrepresented, essentially. Yeah, not by you personally. So that's why we're doing this. We need to readjust those percentages and bring the districts back into alignment. So we also have a compressed timeline in 2020 to meet the 2022 spring elections. The normal timeline for this is it works in 3 stages. The county does the supervisory districts, municipalities create their wards, then the municipalities and the county get together and reconcile the wards and the supervisory districts. Each of those stages takes 60 days by statute. However, because of delays in the census due to COVID, we did not get the data until August 16th from the Wisconsin Legislative Technology Services Bureau, LTSB. They actually get the census data and put it into a format that all of the counties can use. So we plan to be complete with the final supervisory district plan by November 2nd. So in 2021, August 16th to November 2nd is 78 days versus the normal 188 days that we could take. Next one, please. Our guidelines. First priority is the lowest possible deviation from the ideal district size of 4,923, so we don't want to be too high or too low over that. Second priority is compact, contiguous districts, keep communities of interest intact, make the district lines easy to follow, town boundaries, municipal boundaries, certain roads, a river. And then the fourth priority is we need to, our splits, we have to meet ward guidelines. So if we split a municipality, then they need to create wards to accommodate that. Again, more information about the guidelines. If your community with a population of greater than the 4,923, try to ensure that that municipality had at least one district, supervisory district to itself, wholly within that community, and then try to make the splits within a municipality to a minimum, meaning a township maybe only would have 2 districts if it was required. Some of our municipalities, our cities are larger, they end up with 3 splits. Some of the towns might have 3 splits. And then we also try to look at these school districts to try to minimize school district conflicts, because with more splits in the school districts, we ended up creating multiple ballots and election not problems, but greater election issues. And then just decrease voter and election confusion and cost. A little bit about wards. After tonight, if we approve the tentative supervisory district plan, the municipalities will have the opportunity to go in and create ward plans. We have already started to create ward plans for some of the municipalities because we've done that in the past, and in some of the places it's quite straightforward, so we'll be able to do that for them. They can look at those and agree, bring it to their town board or council and approve those ward plans. If they disagree, then we have to go through that reconciliation process. Wards are combined to create these election districts at the county, so we combine the wards to create supervisor districts. In the larger cities, Hudson and New Richmond, they'll be combined to create alderman districts. And the supervisor districts must follow the ward lines. And further information, the municipalities with population greater than 1,000 must create the wards. So you must have multiple wards if your population is greater than 1,000. The ward should be between 300 and 1,000 if your population is less than 10,000. If your population is greater than 10,000, your wards can be between 600 and 2,100. Yeah, and the wards must follow those census block boundaries. Okay. So we presented two plans to the administration committee, Plan 1 and Plan 2. They ultimately selected the Plan 1 to move forward to tonight's public hearing. We have a total plan deviation of 3.84%. So if you add up all of the percent deviation of the different districts, it totals 3.84. That's quite a low deviation, something that we were shooting for, so we have equal representation at this time. Some of the, I guess it would be case law dictates that we should be under 10% deviation, and the lower, probably the better. But we also then try to respect those other boundaries for election purposes. And some of these comparisons up there, we're comparing Plan 1 and Plan 2. There would be no split district in the village of Roberts. One of our plans was splitting Roberts. This plan does have a split in the town of Stanton, right in the southwest corner, where they have some more of their intense housing is going to go into a district around New Richmond. Then there'll be some small splits in the towns of Star Prairie, Richmond, and Stanton. Hudson is large enough that 3 supervisory districts fit in there quite well, and they will all have superb representation. The town of Hudson is going to have 3 supervisory districts. One will be shared with the village of North Hudson. And the other one is actually shared with Troy, I believe. So they'll have one complete district all to themselves. So that's the Supervisory District Plan 1, the tentative plan that's moving forward tonight. Any questions concerning that? You can see in the northeast quadrant, we were able to group them by municipalities, so we did not have to split Stanton, Ceylon, Forest, Glenwood, and Emerald, especially because they're under the 1,000 population level, so they don't need 2 wards. They only will have 1 ward. Same thing for some of the towns in the southeast. We were able to group Hammond and town of Hammond and village of Hammond and Rush River, communities of interest around River Falls out into Troy and Kinnickinnick, community of interests around Somerset. Yeah, so that's the example of Plan 1. And then we have Plan 2, but I think we could skip right past that to keep going. So select the tentative plan, select tentative plan to the county board for public hearing and adoption. Then next steps after that, We would send this to the municipalities. In fact, the state has a quite nice system for this. We'll click our information that the tentative plan was confirmed. The municipalities will get an email that they can then create ward plans. And we have already created some ward plans for them already. They can go in and confirm them after they pass a resolution. Then we'll be able to move on to the final district plan. If their ward plans conflict with the supervisory district plans, we also have a time frame in there to do what is called reconciliation. So we'll work with the municipalities on their ward plans for the larger cities, their aldermanic districts as well.
Supervisor Long?
So just to confirm, this is a tentative plan, and there still could be some minor modifications and changes, and so there
Correct.
is some flexibility as the process
Yep,
goes
and you'll
forward.
have another public hearing before the final plan.
Supervisor Achterhoff?
Yeah, this has really nothing to do necessarily with the county planning, but I've had 2 phone calls from my constituents in Forest where part of Forest has been switched to a new state plan. I told them I assume they have to contact their senator or representative to do something about that. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't play a role in that.
That's what I told them, yeah, and, okay, I just wanted to verify that. Thank you.
And I haven't been contacted about any of that, and I guess I need to refresh myself if that impacts anything that we've done here, but I don't believe it does.
Other question, Supervisor Shatner?
Yes, I kind of find it interesting that on District 1, it grew almost the exact rate population without changes, but yet I still see there's a change, a need to change. It goes into the town of Star Prairie, and they're going to have another ballot.
Yes, yep. Some of the.
4,900 people is 4,900 people.
So when we work with, we're confined to census blocks, and the census block is where the census assigns population to, and some of the blocks are bigger geographically and smaller geographically, and trying to manipulate those things to get districts of equal population. But if you have concern about that area, we can certainly look at it for the final plan.
Supervisor Hall?
Yeah, just a question, curious, because, you know, this is my first time looking at this sort of process, but if I look at District 6, which is mine, between the 2 plans, there seems to be about a 30 to 40% larger geographical area in Plan 1 to Plan 2.
Yep.
And yet the population stays the same. And I guess it's just, you know, maybe it's just more densely populated, but I'm trying to understand, you know, where those other people went in Plan 2 that would, I think it'd go into Supervisor Cook's district and Supervisor Burning. So between the 3 of us, you know, the boundaries kind of move around, but the population stays about the same.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Supervisor Hanson, I'm sorry. I'm still thinking on the last question.
Is there a place that I can kind of clearer map? Oh.
You just shut it off.
Can you hear me now? All right, I'll start over. Thank you. Is there a place where I can get
Yes,
a
I
more detailed
believe in the
map?
public hearing, we had individual district maps that are part of the packet.
Does that go down to the street level so that I can see where
Yes.
the proposed, because
I know they were online for the public hearing announcement, but yes, it does go down to the street level.
this, is
If
it,
not,
so it's,
I have actually paper copies back here.
they're better than this?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, I went online and downloaded it and then blew up a section of it, so you can do it there, yeah. Okay, thanks, Dan. Any other questions? Comments? Seeing none, I guess we're ready to vote then. Dave, you want to put your second in? Voted this time? Carries unanimous, and I would like to thank our Community Development Division for their expeditious getting us ready for it. Thank you. Get my eyes back on. So we'll move on then to the next item, is a resolution amending the 2021 budget on 3 ARPA projects. Administrator Witt.
A motion first.
A motion, Supervisor Long,
I'll move to approve.
and a second from Supervisor Cook. Thank you.
Yeah. So this information is from the Committee of the Whole meeting that we had. I went through and pulled out the projects that we would start in 2021, and this budget amendment is amending the 2021 budget to allocate those funds for 2021's use. I also listed on here for informational purposes all the other funds that we've allocated for future years, so you can see the bigger picture. So that's the basis of what we have here. I know there's been discussion of a few amendments to this since that Committee of the Whole meeting. I have one that I would like to suggest for you, and that's because the audit report was completed after we finished with the Committee of the Whole meeting, so we got those final details, and the online reporting portal to the federal government was opened up. So with the new information and with the online reporting portal, and we could see the exact way that they wanted it to report, we were able to calculate a lost revenue. So we'd originally anticipated we weren't going to have lost revenue based upon our early calculations, but the way the federal government wanted it, we came up with 2.4 million of lost revenue. It's a paper number. We didn't lose 2.4 million, so. But they use an inflationary factor over a 3-year period to project out what we should have been at potentially. So 2.4 million is the number. But the important part of that is lost revenues basically declassifies the use, it defederalizes those funds. So out of that first 8.8 million that we got, we can take 2.4 million and unrestrict the use of it. It's not completely unrestricted. You still can't use it for debt. You can't use it for rainy day funds. You can't use it for certain things. But you can use it for a broader use, namely capital improvement projects, which, they really kind of limit originally. So my recommendation is that we add on here an amendment that would change the revenue replacement of the 2.4 million and reduce it from the broadband money, the 4 million that we had set aside for broadband. Between now and next May, we're not going to spend all of that anyways, and we're going to get another 8.8 million in May. So that's my recommendation, is to for that amendment, and then we can talk about some of the other ones that I've heard discussed by different supervisors.
Supervisor Achterhoff?
Yeah, I guess I want to make one change for the, what we were going to pay for compensation. It bothers me that, well, I get several things, is we paid the admin in a lump for that was their extra hours, but that's part of being salary is prepared. And for those that aren't on salary, we were going to do it paycheck to paycheck, and in 3 years or whatnot, we were going to leave disgruntled employees to whatever board is here. And I don't like that. I think, what do you know, and if the way we were gonna do it, what if some employee that has worked all the way through COVID and then has to leave for some reason? They lose out. And so I would like to be paid in a lump sum now. And, they're gonna get the same amount and, and it's up to them how they wanna spend it, but it really bothers me to put off for a future board a possible negative situation that we can rectify right now. It's no difference in financing. And the people that were here, I mean, if they weren't here for the whole thing, I assume it can be prorated. I know it's going to be a hassle for finance, but I don't feel comfortable doing it the way that we're doing it.
Supervisor Hanson, you had a comment?
Yeah, what Supervisor Achterhoff is asking for is an amendment that would change the allocation year for, it's project 700-180. It's the Healthcare Campus Direct Care staff compensation. We had planned on spending that $300,000 over a number of years. She would like to roll all of that into 2021 so that it can be paid out this year yet. In total, as bonuses for the healthcare campus staff. And then also project 700-300, which is the law enforcement staff compensation. She would also like to bring that forward all into 1 year. It would be 2022, not 2021 for them. We're still working on how that would be distributed with the union. But bringing it all into the first year rather than distributing it over 3 years. So that's, I believe, a summary of what Supervisor Achterhoff is asking for.
Supervisor Hanson, go ahead.
Am I on? All right. I wanted to, I tend to think we need to talk about what Judy brought up, but what this is a kind of a tangent from where we were, which is to look at the amendment to capture revenue replacement that you'd asked for and have the suggested amendment in the packet. So I would actually make that amendment so we can get on with that piece of business first. And I'd make the amendment the way it's written in the packet, request an amendment to capture revenue replacement. I'd like to move, I would like to move to amend, and the movement would read just the way it says. Request an amendment to capture revenue replacement. Between the administration committee meeting and the county board meeting, additional information became available to complete the federal reporting for lost revenues. While initially not anticipated, we were able to calculate. Is that about right, what you wanted to say? Okay. While initially not anticipated, we were able to calculate lost revenues, which provides more flexibility on how the funds are used. This does not spend the money, but defederalizes the grant dollars. The budget amendment will place the revenue into the KIP fund for use to support planned capital projects. It says change project 700210 broadband from $4 million to $1,553,648. Add revenue replacement of $2,446,352, and then it lists the transactional granted, other federal grants, and some numbers, and the amendment.
Okay, do we have a second to that? Supervisor Hall, seconds. Discussion? Supervisor Long.
I think it's really important to understand that if we do this, then the following year there's going to, I mean, broadband was a huge emphasis for us, especially during our strategic planning. So you have to recognize that if we take some of that money and reallocate it, which makes sense, but next year we're going to have to allocate that much more to make sure that we're supporting our broadband, and we're going to have that much less for other projects. So we have to make sure that we're comfortable with that and remember that next year, because broadband is really significant and was really important in all of our discussions.
Supervisor Hall.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Long. I would like to understand, so this is an assessment that, basically an accounting decision that we're down 2.5, what would our options be in your mind? Otherwise, I mean, I'm curious, how else might we handle this in your mind?
Well, I think the other option is to leave it as is to make sure that we have funding for broadband. But as, Administrator Witt pointed out, we're not really going to likely spend all that money next year. So it does make sense to do the reallocation. It's just that the following year, if we're really going to spend resources on broadband, we're going to have that much less to spend on other projects. We just have to be comfortable with that. This makes sense to me. I'm trying to point out the consequence of we get another 8.8 million next year. We're going to have to, allocate that much more to broadband. I just want to make sure that we understand that's a consequence.
Administrator Witt, did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I was just going to say that when we move that 2.4 million, it defederalizes it. We can still spend that money on broadband. It doesn't mean we can't spend it on broadband. It just means we're not now restricted on how to spend that 2.4 million. So, I mean, to your point, we still could. The other part is, I don't have any problem with what you're suggesting. A lot of the 8.8 million is going to go towards broadband, because when you looked at our list, we covered most of all the other items on that list. So I think we did pretty good on covering that. So broadband is one of the last few items for funding.
Supervisor Octoth?
Yeah, my comment about the broadband is, I have a lot of concerns, because does the county want to get, I understand the importance of broadband, but in St. Croix County, we have all these independent companies that provide it. So what is St. Croix County going to do? Are we going to pay for them to lay lines, and then they're going to control how much they want to charge? So it's great. We'll provide broadband, but they're going to be charging so much that nobody can afford it. I want to know a better understanding about what this county's getting into. I mean, we talk broadband, 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 but the county is not the provider. And so what is the county going to do with $8 million? I mean, we can get, hopefully these other companies are going to get grants and stuff like that, but I don't understand what's happening.
We are going to have a broadband plan by October, so we will tell you exactly what we're going to do. And that's why when we reserve the dollar amount, we don't really know yet what it's going to be used for. So it goes up, it goes down. That's fine until we get this plan. Once we have the plan in October, and you love the plan, then we can talk about how much dollar amount needs to be allocated for it.
Well, no matter what the plan is, we know that we need to get access, and that's going to cost millions and millions and millions of dollars. And that, in my mind, is not the county's responsibility. But we have to help. I don't know, but it just opens a whole new world of, I don't even know what the word would be, but yeah, I just don't see the county spending $8 million on broadband. That's going to be up to the individual. I would love to have that put in a fund and have it be reserved to pay for when we actually get it, to pay for low-income people's cost, depending on what it would cost them. But that's a long ways down the road, and I won't be on the board then, so who knows?
I think in the interest of time, that will come later. We're just, setting the money aside for now. Any other, Supervisor Cook?
Yeah, when we have talked about broadband a lot, and I do think, as I've mentioned multiple times, it's very important. How we're going to get there, I think that's one reason why we hired the consultant to do the feasibility study. I'm hoping we will have good recommendations, and not speculating what that could be. I suspect it could be public-private partnerships that will get us there, but I'm okay with this amendment. Back to the amendment, I'm okay with the amendment because it's my understanding that basically we're just defederalizing the money. We could potentially still use it for broadband, correct? Or whatever. So we will have those conversations, and it still could be there, but it gives us a choice. Right.
Further questions or comments? Put your second in, Tim. I think we're ready then to vote on the amendment. Does everybody understand the amendment?
No, I do. The one that Dan, okay.
Okay, we'll vote. Carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we have to move on to, okay, Supervisor Ard.
Mr. Chairman, I also have an amendment. If you will kindly look at 700-160, this is detox management services. This was initially presented at $150,000 and is now being presented at $50,000. The detox management services is critical to the other program components that HHS has proposed. And detox management services are also critical in managing the number of emergency room visits, unauthorized hospitalizations, law enforcement pickups, and homelessness. And if Director Rohart would come to the mic, I'd appreciate if he could add comment and answer any questions regarding this.
Did you make a motion,
Were you moving that officially?
or are you getting information?
No, I'll make the motion. I'm moving to amend 700-160 to $150,000.
Do we have a second for that?
Just as a clarification, there has to be an offsetting deduct then. So if 100,000 gets added, we have to deduct 100,000 from somewhere.
We just approved moving $2.4 million.
Okay, Supervisor Tomczyk, you're seconding. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
So, don't we have money that we have that is not, that's still like?
It's not 100,000.
Okay, that's,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Supervisor Burning.
where is that 100,000 coming from? Like how are we getting that 50 to 150?
Supervisor Ard.
We just moved $2.4 million. I'm sure we can move on $50,000 back or $100,000 back to make this program a reality, and thus saving even more funding going through all of our systems, including the courts.
Supervisor Henderson.
Where did the 100,000 go that we discussed back in the committee of the whole? This was 150 before, right? Where did you move that 100 to?
Okay. So when we went through the list, there was some horse trading going on between different programs. So this one was cut, and other projects were added in, because there's a finite amount of money here that we're dealing with. It's 8,800,000 and some thousand, rounded off here. So if you, when it was deducted in order to fit it in to the total that we had. So I think we should probably let HHS Director Rohart talk about this first, because I think it actually might have been his suggestion that we could decrease this, and the fact that we might get some opioid monies that would be able to be used towards this. I think that might have been part of what played into that. But Bob.
Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Administrator Witt. I don't know that I'll be a perfect historian on how that discussion went. I do recall that there was a reduction to the $150,000 proposed, and I was asked if the $50,000 would be enough, and I said anything would be helpful. And then I don't remember exactly how that conversation played out. If you would like me to further explain what the intention behind this was, or I can answer other questions, I'd be happy to do that.
Supervisor Hanson?
Could you just, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, and certainly don't want to play you against your boss, but what can you do with 50,000 and what can you do with 150, and how critical is that extra 100,000 going to be? Can you even spend that much money?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, and it's difficult for me to answer with certainty that we would need X amount of dollars to do this project. One of the challenges with starting any new project, starting a new service essentially in this region, is that the costs are presented as you develop the program. So this would be, like I said, a unique service for this region that doesn't exist now. And I need to work with the state of Wisconsin to develop it. And, you know, some of the obvious costs are going to be around equipment, around potentially physical kinds of adjustments to the environment to create a living environment for these clients or patients, and then to look at contracting for possibly a medical director role from a hospital that would cost X amount, about one maybe position. There are costs like that that go into operating a facility with medical components to it, and some of those components involve medical oversight, so that's what I was thinking in terms of primary cost would be a medical director percentage FTE that would help to oversee medication management, standing orders, and things of that nature. Again, I'm estimating based on experience in operating one of these facilities, so it's a cost that is not definable but anticipated, and in operating a facility like this is expensive. We intend to use other ARPA initiatives to supplement mobile case management and those kinds of things to operate in conjunction with this. But $50,000 would be a very minimal amount of money to operate even a small program like this. It could be done for a period of time, certainly, but without sustainable funding coming in yet. How long we could sustain that, I'm not sure.
Supervisor Long?
So the other option would be, until we really have a better idea or define the cost, this gets us started, and then we can always relook at it again next year when we get the other 8.8 million and say, now we need some additional funding, that we have a better handle on the costs and where we want to go with the program. Would that be a reasonable approach?
It would be, Supervisor Long. Again, the startup costs are sort of hard to estimate. So $50,000, yes, we could probably get the equipment. We could get the physical layout of the program arranged for that. I think in terms of contracting with, say, a medical provider for some oversight, that might be problematic if it were, would you contract with us for 6 months or something of that nature? I think I was looking more long-term at how we could develop this and sustain it through this funding for maybe 3 years, and then within that time find sustainable funding through state or Medicaid as a way to continue it. The contracting piece, if we need to look at outside providers, might be challenging with a short time frame like that.
Administrator Witt?
So when we talk about where to find the money, our facilities director, Mr. Ellsbury, has been able to projected to resolve the healthcare campus stormwater infiltration at $25,000 rather than the $75,000 we had estimated when we put this together. So there's $50,000 that we can reallocate from the stormwater infiltration project to this. So there, we can go to $100,000. If you'd like any additional, I would recommend that we deduct it from the broadband, because that seems to be the catch-all at this point for where we're moving money around from. But
Okay, so I guess I'm getting a sense that we could go to 100,000 and leave it at that, but that would be up to the mover and the seconder, Supervisor Hanson, you?
I'll make an amendment to the amendment that we offset the 150,000 by, what's the number we're looking for here? The Go from 50 to 100. We take the 50,000 from the wastewater, and then the balance from,
So you have 50,000 already in the budget.
right,
So
so
you
we,
can go to 100 taken from stormwater. If you go to
Right.
150, you take the additional 50 from broadband.
and that's my amendment to the amendment right there.
Okay.
Man, I'm gifted with language.
So it's going from 50,000 to 150,000 for the detox, and it's taking 50,000 from the stormwater project and 50,000 from broadband.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to amend the amendment from, to 150,000, however, 50,000 coming from broadband and 50,000 from facilities. Further discussion on it? Seeing none, I guess we're ready to vote.
We're voting on the amendment to the amendment.
Okay, we now have an amendment to change the figure to 150,000. Everybody on board with that? Supervisor Achterhoff?
Okay, if we're on, then I would like to make an amendment. Yeah, because that's what I started out with, but I never made an amendment.
Okay, any further discussion on this amendment?
So this
Everybody-
amendment is approving the 150,000. The clarifying one we just voted on was where the money came from. But now you're approving that it will be the 150,000 for detox.
Supervisor Burning, go ahead.
So didn't we just move 50,000?
No, 250s.
250s. I knew that, just making sure you knew that.
Further questions? Okay, we'll vote on this amendment. Carries unanimously, and so now, Supervisor Achterhoff.
Yeah, okay, now I'd like to make an amendment changing for sure the HHS compensation to, instead of the years 2021 to 2000, oh, I can't find it, to maybe just year 2021, and I know that it gets complicated in regards to law enforcement because we're working with the union, but I don't know how you want to handle that one then.
So you could move that one all up to 2022 to consolidate it into 1 year. You want to move them all into 1 year. So the healthcare campus we can do this year yet because we don't have a union contract to negotiate through. The other one would be, if I could have 2022 as the year to do that.
How about by the end of 2022, because that allows you to do the health, if I say 2022, you can't do health and human services until that year, or can you do it earlier?
Oh, well, healthcare campus I was going to do this year, 2021.
Right, that's why, so I need two amendments, or
No, you
include?
could do it as one amendment.
Okay, so the healthcare would be 2021,
Okay.
and the law enforcement would be 2022, dependent on union agreement.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Supervisor Leaf to go ahead and discuss the changes there for sure, so you get right. Supervisor Long?
What's the specific project number? Which line item is it?
So it is project 700, 180. So healthcare campus direct care staff compensation. It's rolling it all up into the first year is the first half of that amendment. And then it's project 700, 300, the sheriff's department law enforcement staff compensation, 375,000. Again, rolling that all up into the first year on the schedule.
So a follow-up question, what are there potential consequences or impact, advantages, disadvantages of rolling into 1 year as opposed to spreading it out? That's what I'm curious at. I mean, it sounds great, but are there consequences?
Supervisor Actor?
Well, my comment was, one of the consequences is leaving that out to whatever the board is in 2024, when a whole bunch of employees' paychecks get cut. And even though they understand that it was only supposed to be for 3 years, that is not how most people will react. Because, 3 years is long enough to forget. We're going to have a lot of new people on this board that had no idea what we did, and they're going to be upset that we stuck them with this problem. 2 is, it's their money, and they're going to be getting it at some point anyhow. Why not give it to them all at once? Some of them may just be frivolous with it. Some of them may invest it very wisely and potentially be more successful if they got one lump rather than others. And it's also that when we paid the admin, we paid them in a lump for any amount of time that they worked over 40 hours. And while these people may not have worked extra, they had to work in conditions that were not pleasant and not safe. And they should be rewarded. And I fully feel that giving it to them in a lump sum is a recognition of what they've had to go through for the past 2 years.
Supervisor Hall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I ask the administrator if there's a positive or financial negative to the county to do it as a lump?
No, it's a set dollar amount. It doesn't matter when or how it's distributed, quite frankly, to the county. It's just a dollar amount.
Supervisor Hanson?
Do we know what Sandy Hackemuller and Bob Rohert would prefer to do? It's their facility.
Well, I'm pretty sure I know what Sandy would like to do, but we try to keep her under control. So, yeah, what we're going to do with that money, it's for direct care support staff. We're going to use it as a lump sum bonus. So we had looked at it originally to spread it out over a number of years as retention bonuses. You can do it all in 1 year, and it's just a bigger bonus. So that's really, I guess, the consideration before you right now. Is you want to spread the bonus out over multiple years, or do you want one bigger one in the beginning?
Further questions or comments? Anything? Okay, Supervisor Hanson?
This is just the second part of my, is there a chance that this, how much money are we talking about per person? Is there a chance we could push somebody into a higher income bracket and hurt them?
Let's see. Oh, the pain.
And if that's the case, could we give them the option of splitting it over 2 years?
No, you're not going to push them into a higher tax bracket.
Well, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I just thought I'd ask.
They're nice bonuses, but they're not quite that big.
Okay, I think probably then we're ready to vote on the amendment. Everybody's aware of the amendment. Any questions on it? Supervisor Burning?
This amendment is to pay out the retention bonuses in one lump sum rather than over 3 years. And the law enforcement one is pending union ratification on that.
Same theory, though. You're requesting it be done in the first year rather than spread over 3 years.
Okay, and then if it's not amended, it stays that way. It stays this way without, no.
Yeah, the dollar
I guess
amount
what my
doesn't
question is
change.
on the law enforcement component of it, is it just kind of known that it needs union? So does it need to be inserted into this?
Yeah. So the dollar amount for it and the timing of when you want me to use it is what you're dictating. The methodology and actual distribution are items that we would have to negotiate with the union.
Right, but we don't have to instruct you per this amendment, and that's what I'm catching. It's just kind of formality?
Well, this amendment is telling me to do it to use the money in the first year rather than spread it out over 3 years.
For law enforcement too?
Correct. Yep. So it'll be year 2022 for them rather than 21, but,
Yeah.
right.
Supervisor Achterhoff?
I just have one comment that in the packet, it's compensation, not retention. We are compensating the employees for work they have already done. So, and there's a big difference between the two.
Okay, I think we're ready to vote at this time then, so we'll vote. Carries unanimously, thank you. I think that,
Now we just have to vote on the resolution.
that's right. Okay, so we're ready to, at this time, then vote on the resolution amending the 2021 budget as amended with all amendments. You got the second, okay, Cindy? So I think we're ready to vote now on this one, so we'll vote. Carries unanimous, thank you. Next one is the resolution establishing the library levy. Do I have a motion to bring that forward?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the motion for the library levy.
Do I have a second? Supervisor Achterhoff. Discussion. Supervisor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've had a lot of conversations about the library, this resolution in the past over multiple years. We all know there's a lot of history. What I'm passing around here is a potential change to the resolution that I'm not proposing an amendment today because it's my understanding, if you read in the packet, at the administration committee, we discussed an agreement that is a proposed agreement potentially that the current members of the library could consider. That's not, per conversation with Corp Counsel, that is not on the agenda tonight, so we are not discussing that. But in this packet that, and thank you to staff for working on this in the last 24 hours here with my questions, is a potential draft of a change to the resolution that we could consider at a future meeting, potentially in October, if the members of the current Hudson Joint Library decide to move forward with the agreement. It's my understanding that all the members have to move forward with the agreement. And in the packet, it includes a copy of the intergovernmental agreement and also some information, some feedback from the Legislative Reference Bureau. So again, we're not here to talk about that agreement today or make an amendment. I'm done talking about it.
Great.
Yes, I'm done. I'm just explaining the packet. Anyway.
You did a good job.
Okay. So regarding that, that potential agreement, that's something that we can consider in October. The resolution before us, we discussed at admin. I understand, based on the history of this, the resolution that's before you, the reason that over the past number of years, there's been the vote to reduce the money to the Hudson Joint Area Library. I understand that for other libraries because there is a penalty, but as I voted in admin, I can't support that resolution because I'm looking at my own library in the district that I represent that is losing funding. So while I will be voting no on this resolution, I strongly hope that we will be coming back here in October to discuss a future conversation and a future agreement that can help support the joint library and also the other libraries and increase their compensation.
Supervisor Octo.
Yeah, my comment is going to be that even at the Hudson Library would be paying out even more money than what they're losing by the 30% if they were going to reimburse the libraries what they properly should and what they agreed on. So this hurts Hudson a little and it hurts the others a little. If we do not do this and we pay Hudson 100 and the other libraries don't get any portion of that 30%, we are rewarding Hudson for reneging on a promise, and we are really hurting a lot of other libraries. By doing it this way, several libraries are hurt a little, but nobody's hurt humongously and no one's rewarded.
Other questions or comments? Supervisor Peavy.
So Ken, what would be the total library levy then? Because it would be the 1,038,458 plus 8,706. Am I reading them correctly? It'd be the 100%, $1,038,40 or 1,338,458 plus the 8,706. The hotspot.
Yeah, and then the out-of-county of $49,094.
So that comes to a total of?
$1,096,258.
Correct total.
Yep.
So my only comment is that this levy is over $1 million on the townships. So this isn't trivial. It sounds like, well, it's just a library levy, but only the townships pay this. So just want everybody to be aware that, you know, every cornfield, every one of Ed's and my pastures pays library tax, which is the state statute, so there's nothing we can do about that. But, you know, I just want everybody aware, when we get down to the end of the thing, we talk about tax levies, but here we're about to stick $1 million levy on the towns. So just my comment. Thank you.
Supervisor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm torn on this issue as a representative for the city of Hudson. I want to look out for this library and make sure that it's properly funded. This is a continuing year-over-year process that we see ourselves with. I would like to see it come to an end with a fair agreement next month that we can vote on. And I think right now, I mean, if I knew that we were going to have this in front of us next month, I would feel better. Is that of the plan? Can I ask?
It depends on the other municipalities. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the plan is to bring an agreement forward if the four municipalities of the area library, joint library, agree to something that, you know, we can agree with, and then if that's the case, then we'll bring bring the agreement forward for ratification, and then that would change. We would bring a revised resolution which would add the municipalities of the Hudson Area Joint Library to be part of the tax levy for the county tax levy, and so they would be levied as well. But I don't really want to discuss it more than that, but hopefully we'll have that, you know, if the municipalities agree, we will bring that forward in October.
Supervisor Osnes, did you have a question? Supervisor Hall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked a follow-on question, and it's just out of my need to understand. So if we are potentially considering this next month, could we motion to put this tableless for a month and not vote on it tonight, and then bring it back next month, since I think if we take a vote now, there's just a potential that maybe will harden some people's feelings. I'd rather talk about a regular agreement than do this and then come back and try and do that discussion. Is that a possibility?
I recommend against that, and the only reason is we do this resolution every year because the dollar amount on here creates the levy rate, and the local municipalities are exempt if they match or exceed that levy rate. They're all working on their municipal budgets right now, and they need to know what our rate is. We've told them what we think it's going to be, but until the county board approves it, I can't say this is what it is. So I really need a resolution setting this rate so that those municipalities can finalize their budget and file for their exemptions. So the 4 municipalities, though, that are in the joint library have already filed their exemption. So they've already hedged themselves for an agreement not happening. We're just doing the same. If we can all come together, that's all going to change in October, but there's a lot of things that have to happen between now and then. And if those things don't happen, this still has to be approved.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Supervisor Octor?
Yeah, I just want, in regards to what Superintendent Peavy said, it's what the administrator said. The other counties that have the library in them have to meet the levy that all the rural areas. So that this particular amount is coming from the rural, but because the towns, villages, whatever, that already have libraries are providing the funds. And this is the way for the rural residents who have used the libraries to pay their share. There are some discrepancies. I know hotspots, so but for the most part, this is because of the rural residents using a library because their community doesn't have one. It's their fair share, and yes, there's a lot more land in rural areas than there are people in respect to a city that has a library, but it's equal. It's not saying that it's, it's rural, but it goes by the person and the number of books that have been taken out.
Okay, I think we're ready to vote at this time then. There's no amendment. There is no amendment. There is no amendment. The motion carries and
It's a majority,
majority.
and this serves as a roll call if that's the issue.
Okay, I've had a request for a short break, so we'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll move on. We have a lot of stuff to cover yet. Okay, we've got a quorum. We'll start the meeting. The next item then on the agenda is the Birmingham County Administrator's Work Plan. Do I have a motion to bring that forward? Supervisor Long?
I would move to approve the resolution approving the county administrator's work plan.
I have a second by Supervisor Peavy, and we'll have discussion. Any discussion on the supervisory county administrator work plan? Supervisor Long, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just mention this was discussed in a variety of things in the administration committee meeting. I know that Administrator Witt had put these suggestions together, and we had kind of talked through this, and they seem pretty reasonable. So that's about as much as I guess I can tell you from our committee discussion on it, unless Administrator Witt would like to add anything.
Further questions or comments? If not, we'll go ahead and vote on the administrator's plan. Carries unanimous, thank you. Next one would be the resolution adopting the strategic plan 2022 to 2025. Motion to bring that forward, Supervisor Long,
I've moved to approve the strategic plan.
second by Supervisor Osnes, and discussion. Supervisor Long.
I'll just make a quick comment. You're all lucky that you got to see a clean copy of this, because the one we looked at had all the lines through it and the red lines and the greens and all that kind of good stuff. But I guess from my personal opinion, as I looked through it, I thought it was very representative of our discussions over the past couple of months. I think they captured those discussions pretty well, and so this should set the stage for the next couple of years. And the important thing, I think, is making sure that we follow through next year in that all the, as you see in the administrator's work plan for next year, is actually developing action plans to implement the strategic plan, and that will be the critical thing to make sure that we're following through on that.
Supervisor Toljan.
Now that we have a vision and mission statement, I'd like to see it published more and put on top of all agendas so it directs what our decision making is at each meeting. I have no idea what our previous vision and mission statement was. Even in orientation, I never heard anything about it, so I'd like to see it more publicly noted and published and plastered all over.
Point taken. Further questions, comments? Okay, I think we're ready to vote. Carries unanimous, thank you. The last item for this business is resolution would be amending the personnel policies. Ken, are you going to cover that? Oh, I need a motion. Bring that, Supervisor.
I'll move to
Long.
approve the resolution.
Second by Supervisor Ard. And Tara, go ahead.
I can answer any questions. There was only 2 policies this time. The one policy with the vehicle usage, that was a new policy to the handbook, but it did already exist in other documents that we had, so we just put it actually in the handbook. And then the other policy was just combining the key policy with the badge policy and then just updating the language in the handbook. So I can answer any questions you might have, but those are the only 2 for this time.
Questions, comments? We'll vote. Thank you, Tara.
You're gonna get
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Supervisor Connor.
Just had one question on, do you have any requirements as far as how the vehicles for logging out and all of that, and like a running log of where they're taken and how they're used?
Well, we do have the kiosk out front where they check out the keys, but as far as where they're taking them, I might actually have to ask either Ken or Jim how that gets tracked.
Yeah, there's a written log in each vehicle that's also noted where it's taken and mileage for each trip.
Further questions?
Is it, the way you have it for the logs and stuff, do you have a requirement of them to do the logging out? Or is that in the policy or?
No. I don't know if it's in the policy, but they are all required to use it, and we have 100% compliance on that. I don't know of any vehicles that aren't, because that's how we end up charging back the departments for the usage. So it's a pretty common practice. So.
Anybody else have questions? Seeing none, thank you, Tara, and we'll vote. Carries unanimous, thank you. And we'll move on to annual department reports. Judicial Circuit Court judges. Ken? No. Judge Waterman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I bring greetings from my colleagues, Judges Needham, Black, and Nordstrand. I am privileged to deliver the Circuit Court's annual report. We really enjoy a special relationship with our county. It's a true state-county relationship and a partnership at that. We as judges are state officials. We are administered by the Director of State Courts and ultimately the Wisconsin Supreme Court. But we rely upon our partners in the county to provide us with facilities, with funding, and with our staff. And we are very proud that this partnership works. We have a good relationship with our county and with the county board. And I think with that, we're able to deliver efficient, fair justice on a timely basis for all of the citizens of St. Croix County. I do want to recognize a couple of people who've been very helpful over the past year and a half. That is John Allegro and Jim Ellsbury and their staff. During COVID, we had to make real changes to the way that we did business. Otherwise, we would be out of business. We had to change the physical outlay of our courtrooms. We had to have significant equipment upgrades and technological upgrades. And John and Jim and their staff did incredible work to get that done quickly and get us up and running. And because of that, the courts have been operating through the pandemic nearly at full capacity. And as a result, our citizens are able to get timely justice, and our backlog, as small as it may be, only exists in jury trials. Otherwise, we've been able to stay open and address our caseload. There are a few things I want to comment tonight about. I think these things will be relevant to you in your policymaking decisions and ultimately your budget decisions. The first one has to do with space and facilities. As the county grows, so does our caseload. In 2010, and bear in mind the majority of our work is in criminal law. 2010, our criminal case filings were 1,500. 10 years later, in 2020, we hit 2,265. For 2021, this year, we're still on pace to meet or exceed 2020 numbers. We're at least going to exceed 2,000 new criminal files. Civil cases and small claims cases have gone down since 2010. In my opinion, that's largely because the economy's been pretty good. You'll remember in 2010, we had a lot of foreclosures, a lot of evictions. So those numbers have been steadily going down, but we are bracing for a wave of likely new cases now that the eviction and the foreclosure moratoriums have been lifted. In fact, some of the attorneys who practice in that area have notified us, you better watch out because we're coming back. Divorces, paternities, they remain steady. We average about 450 per year. I mention all of this because I think it's relevant to your long-range planning. We have 4 circuit court judges. We have 2 court commissioners. We have 4 courtrooms. We have 2 commissioner hearing rooms. We're out of space. And if we will need a 5th judge, it'll probably be sooner rather than later. I can't predict when that's going to happen, but as the county continues to grow, it is going to happen. And all it would take is an uptick in foreclosures or a new wave of epidemics in methamphetamine or heroin to push us up to those numbers sooner than we expected. The Director of State Courts will not approve any county for a new judge until 3 things are met. 1, you have to have a need. 2nd, you have to have county support and a county resolution. And 3rd, you have to have space, and we're frankly out of space. So I mentioned this to you because I know you're undergoing some long-range planning, including facilities, and I think it's important for you to keep our space needs in mind. The second area I want to bring to your attention has to do with child protection cases. The volume of our cases there, too, are increasing. In 2010, we had 46 child protection cases. These are cases of child abuse, child neglect. In 2020, we had 82. Based on the numbers through September 1, I anticipate that we're probably going to exceed 90 cases for 2021, and the trend does not show any signs of relenting. Most of our child protection cases have to do with drugs and alcohol. Parents who are neglecting their children because they're abusing drugs and alcohol. As I had mentioned last month, and as Roy Schulberg had mentioned earlier today in his public comments, we have CASA under the way. And I think a CASA advocate, a court-appointed special advocate, will be able to help fill the void left by parents who are unable to meet the needs for their children. And it allows the children to have one consistent, reliable adult that they can trust on to help them through what is going to be a very difficult and traumatic experience for them as the child goes through the child protection process. I am really proud of the support that I've received from county board members, from administrators, and the public. It looks like CASA is going to be a reality here in the very near future. The last point I want to mention is justice services and the work that justice services do. During the spring of 2021, a task force was convened to examine the way that pretrial services are delivered to the courts. And those services were fragmented between different departments. CJCC coordinator provided some, the report center provided others. We had a treatment court that provided other services. These have all been consolidated under what we call now the Justice Services Department. And I just want to share a few things about the way that the judges use those services so that you can make an informed decision about whether or not that program is worthwhile. One has to do with arrests. Every time a person is arrested and accused of a crime, they come before a judge for a bail hearing. For the past 4 or 5 years, the CJCC coordinator conducted pretrial risk assessments. That way the judges would have an objective, measurable tool from which we can assess a person's risk level and decide whether or not this is a person who is low risk and should be safe in the community, or somebody who is not and needs to have cash bail or some other restrictions. Those assessments also inform judges about who should be monitored while they're on pretrial release, who should be drug tested while they're out in the community, and who isn't appropriate for the criminal justice system and could be diverted completely out of the system into one of the district attorney's diversion programs. That function is now consolidated under justice services. Without pretrial risk assessments, judges are going to lose a very important way that we can that we can assess a person's risk level and what their needs are. We won't be able to identify the low-risk population as objectively. And as a result, probably more people will end up remaining in the criminal justice system or possibly ultimately in the jail. Another example where justice services provides assistance for the judges. Take, for example, a chronic drunk driver. All of the judges will order that drunk driver, accused albeit, to remain absolutely sober while they're on pretrial release. While the day report center was fully staffed and operational, we were also able to order that person be monitored to maintain their sobriety. They're either using a handheld testing device or they're coming in for on-site drug testing. And for the judges, we see it as a matter of public safety. We feel that the public is kept safe if we can have assurances that a chronic drunk driver is not drinking and likely out driving on our roads. Justice Services Department would assume this responsibility too. Another example, someone who is accused of domestic violence, a spousal batterer or domestic batterer. We as judges will order no contact with the victim. When the day report center was fully staffed and functional, we could also put that person on a GPS device. And that way we knew whether that offender was showing up at the victim's home or stalking them at their place of employment. Without that, we are left with an honor system. Again, the judges see this as a matter of public safety. Drug testing. Drug offenders are routinely tested, especially the ones who are high risk, using dangerous drugs like methamphetamine and heroin. We were able to test those individuals through the day report center when it was fully staffed and fully operational. This is a function that is now going to be taken over by Justice Services. But if they're not staffed and if they don't have the ability to administer tests, the result is that we're going to have people who are accused of drug offenses, drug users, who are going to be in the community untested. And we as judges, again, see this as a public safety issue. If we can assure that a drug user is remaining sober, they're not out committing additional crimes. They're not out committing driving crimes or property crimes to fund their addiction. Now, I realize there are some whose addictions are out of control. And Justice Services also serves a function there too. Because for the people who can't maintain their sobriety, Justice Services can redirect them to Department of Health and Human Services where they can receive drug and alcohol treatment so that their addiction can be managed and get them in a treatment setting. Treatment court, they need regular testing, upwards of 3 times per week for each participant. The diversion program, they have 100 people. They too rely on testing. Those services will be provided by Justice Services. Now, data and metrics are not available for the Day Report Center. The Day Report Center and ultimately Justice Services provides a preventative function. We cannot measure something that has been avoided. We can't measure something that hasn't happened. But we can use our common sense. We can use logic. If we're maintaining someone's sobriety, we know that they're not out driving drunk. If we can ensure through a GPS device that they're staying within a geographic restriction, we know that they're not showing up at a victim's home or stalking them at work. Again, we believe that this is a matter of public safety, and this is the value that we as judges see in the Day Report Center services and what's ultimately going to become services provided by Justice Services. Now, you as county supervisors have the ultimate policy and budgetary decisions, and we respect that. And no doubt you are faced with many challenging and hard decisions when it comes to all of the things that people in government think are essential. But we as judges would be remiss if we didn't bring the usefulness and the functionality of these services to your attention. We believe that the administration of justice is best served, and we also believe that public safety is promoted. I'm going to hand it over to some of my other colleagues, but I also want to extend an invitation to all of you. You are all welcome to come to our courtrooms and observe. You're also welcome to do a ride-along, where you can sit along with us up on the bench and see from the judge's perspective what happens. Let us know if you're interested in doing that, and we can find a day that is a relevant calendar, so your experience will be worthwhile. I remember Supervisor Ochterhoff got close. She was a juror of mine, probably about 5 or 6 years ago. So she kind of has a firsthand view of what we do in the courtroom. So I think it was valuable for her to do that, but I do invite all of you to participate if it's something that you're interested in doing. I believe Judge Nordstrand will have the treatment court report. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Judge Nordstrand, George Scott Nordstrand, and I'm glad to be here tonight to talk just briefly about treatment court. If you've been on the board for a period of time, you've heard a report about treatment court. I'm the new treatment court judge as of June, and there are only 2 treatment court judges in the history of this great county, and the longest serving one, Judge Vlack, is back there, I think 10 years or so, right? And then 5 years for Judge Waterman, and now I'm the 3rd treatment court judge in the county and proud to serve in that way. Essentially, we're a problem-solving court. That's a sort of a nickname used in the industry, I've learned, to deal with addiction and the criminal conduct that comes out of addiction. And we have 2 tracks. It's been determined that we shouldn't mix apples and oranges, so to speak. And so we have folks that are dealing with drug addiction on one track, track 1, very easy name to remember. And then track 2, which tends to be our OWI and alcohol-related offenses there. We use a team approach, and I'd encourage you, many of you have been to treatment court. I know you have. You've been to graduation. Encourage you to come anytime. I'm there every Wednesday at 7:30 in the morning for a staff meeting. You can't come to that. But at 8:30 or so, we start, and you're welcome to see what happens. It's got good stories and sad stories and tragic stories. It's the full mix, as you might expect, from people who are working their way through addiction and recovery. It includes myself as the judge, a prosecutor, a public defender, a representative from the Corrections Department for purposes of probation, law enforcement, the Sheriff's Department is represented, Treatment from HHS is represented, who provide our treatment services. And then, all important, our treatment court coordinator, Kim Kitzberger. And that brings it all together, and we all work together to go through I'd say there's about 15 people in the collective program right now, and we have, I don't know, 8 or 10 more waiting to come on track 1. That being said, so that's an overview. There are a couple of issues going on right now that I think are worthy of discussion, at least your awareness. First of all, we're going through the TAD grant process right now. And this is a program of requesting a grant from the Wisconsin Department of Justice to fund certain aspects of treatment court. And also diversion programs that the district attorney's office manages as well. The idea is to find alternatives for people who are suffering from addiction to go into jail. That's the purpose of TAD grants. And so in our county, what gets funded is essentially some testing, the diversion program itself, and assessment of people to determine whether they're eligible or should be part of either treatment court or diversion programs. And diversion programs, I don't know how familiar you are with that, I'll just take a quick aside. That's where somebody's charged with a crime, but they, for reasons based upon their evaluation, their circumstances, might be a person who could benefit from a 1-year or 2-year timeout. Let's get some services to them. Let's get some supervision to them. Let's see if we can get a life change here. And if they can accomplish all the things they need to do in this contract, this diversion agreement between the court and the DA and them as the participant, if they can do all the right things, then that charge could be dismissed or reduced to give them a benefit for having accomplished that. Well, that's essentially, in some ways, that's what treatment court really does. We sort of give the deal up front, in a sense. The sentencing judge says, you're a good candidate for treatment court. I'm going to sentence you to participate in treatment court and do everything in your power to be successful, and that's a condition of your probation. And so in they come in the door after having been approved for treatment court by our team, and ultimately me as the treatment court judge. So that's a TAD grant. We're going to ask for some money, and that helps the whole program. I will say this, it ain't a great big pile. I think it's $140,000 now, and maybe it'll be a little bit more, but don't get too excited about the word grant. It's a helpful bit of money, but it isn't. In fact, most of treatment court is funded with county dollars. Judge Waterman gave you a good overview of the testing issues. I'm not going to repeat all that here, but just say treatment court has to test people, or we have no accountability and much of what we do is dealing with every week people who test positive, and how do we get them the services they need to get a better outcome going forward. Because interestingly enough, if you test positive, say you test positive for THC this week, Judge, sorry I did it, I didn't mean to do it, I didn't want to do it, I just blah, blah, blah. What do? We get them services. We don't penalize them for being an unsuccessful addict. What we do, though, is we require them to be honest. So the penalty might come in, they lie about it, they don't admit it, those kinds of things. So anyway, there's a process we go through to try to work our way forward with folks. Now, there's one last problem I want to talk to you about, and I just want an awareness out there of this. As I said, we have 2 tracks. Track 1 tends to be drug cases, mostly methamphetamine these days. Track 2 is OWIs. It tends to be OWI 4s and above, okay, 4th-time offenders and above, felony offenses. The legislature changed the penalties for OWI 5s and 6s. Which is certainly in their purview, and the idea of getting tough on OWIs is certainly not far from my heart in terms of the risk that they pose to the public. But they basically have said that OWI 5s and 6s generally, unless there's a very probably rare exception, they're going to go to prison for 1.5 years, minimum. It used to be that they could be sentenced to a county jail sentence, put on probation, and participate in treatment court here locally. Those participants, that group of people, will largely leave the building, so to speak, from treatment court. So that's one factor that's going on. And so that leaves us largely with OWI 4s and 3s to deal with as potential people to work with in a treatment court for OWIs. That is combined with the fact, as you know, the sheriff has got some serious challenges in the jail right now. And what that's led to is that people who are eligible for Huber, which is a judge's term for, you know, you've been sentenced, but you can leave the jail during the day to go work or do other things with sheriff's permission. The sheriff is moving those people onto electronic monitoring at home, rather than actually coming back to the jail at night. You know, it's all under his supervision, but the reality is part of the incentive to participate in OWI court is not going to jail. And in particular, electronic home monitoring might be one of the incentives that you use to encourage people to participate. So if essentially the carrot has been given away, it becomes more difficult to get people to volunteer for what is a very rigorous process, right? A year and a half, coming to me every week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks, drug testing every week, several times, going to see our folks in Richmond at the health center for group therapy. Early on, it could be most every night of the week. This is a big burden. Now, people who are motivated to deal with their addiction, I've got a problem, I want help, those people probably won't affect. But the people who are less motivated and are more interested in the easy path, which is not uncommon among addicts and alcoholics, it's going to prove a challenge for recruitment, so to speak. And I just want you to be aware of that. I don't know what's going to happen. But if I had to have a crystal ball, I would think that our OWI Track 2 would, in the near future, decline, and could in fact end in terms of numbers. The other thing to keep in mind, and the last thing I'll say is, remember that this same electronic home monitoring option and Huber that's necessitated by the sheriff's jail problems, and I understand that, as I said. Also, that same lack of incentive will exist for the drug cases, ultimately. So where there might be an opportunity to hold out that carrot of a lesser sentence in jail and home monitoring to encourage people to participate in our program, that might not be there. Hopefully, and I talked to the sheriff, hopefully that can be turned around as his staffing changes happen. But there's a practical reality to all these things in terms of how defendants look at what their deal is, what's offered to them by the prosecutor and by their own lawyer's advice. So that's it for tonight, and I appreciate the county board's support. You know, this is a county that paid for its treatment court out of its own pocket before it got $1 of grant money. And that demonstrates a commitment to something very important here that exists in St. Croix County and has existed for a long time, and we should all congratulate ourselves for that. And I suspect that the courts would take any questions that you might have for the judges on any topic. I think we'll hear from the other departments next, but is there anything further from the courts? Okay. Any questions?
Any questions for the judges? This is your chance, otherwise they're going to ask you.
And you have to come for the ride-along.
Thank you very much, Your Honors. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Supervisor Tomczyk.
So I do understand that what Judge Waterman had mentioned, that we can't use the metric for what we've prevented, but we can speak to what we have seen if there's an increase in felony charges and what people are referred for services versus referred to the DA's office for charges. So I would like to know has that, whether it's a metric or data, been collected for who has been referred for services versus for continued charges? I do note that there is a very large uptick in felony bail jumping charges, and a lot of those do stem from drug issues, in which case then are we then punishing the addict and attempting to punish someone into sobriety? So if the justice services is meant to provide a service, are we measuring that referral for service versus referral for charges?
We as judges don't measure such things. I would think that the Justice Services Department will. That's point one. Point two is our Justice Services Task Force, which I happen to chair, included Travis Sartorius, the public defender manager here in St. Croix County and for surrounding counties. And we took everybody's point of view on how could we create a combined new department with all these tangential services that were scattered around the county to get people out of the bail jump cycle. Okay, the judges are just as frustrated about lists of bail jump charges as anyone else, because ultimately, generally, those charges are dismissed, number one, and they add a lot of fodder to the system without a lot of substance. We all are supportive of the idea that we need to get people with addiction to services. That's why our presiding judge created the Justice Services Task Force. That's the primary reason we wanted to do it. Now, bail jump charges in this county have gone down dramatically in the last few months because we don't test nearly anybody anymore. We had 140 people being tested in May. We test 24 now. So that's in terms of a bail jump charge based upon a bad drug test, that's the universe of possible charging right now. So yes, there was significant bail jumping in the past. Did the judges see that as an issue? Yes. Is one of the ways that we hope to respond to that, along with all of the county support that we had on that Justice Services Task Force, which every department that has any stake in this, was to transition. Now, the Justice Services isn't actually to the point where they've created that link to HHS quite yet. We're getting there. As a matter of fact, I got some information for my intake starting on Monday that actually I'm going to start getting those kinds of assessments that will allow me to more intelligently set bails, set conditions, including testing, and then to use their services to get people to HHS. I think part of that ARPA money that you approved was for additional support for HHS to be on the receiving end of these people, and also 2 additional folks for Susan's new department to be on the sending end. So the case management happening and then the case receiving happening. So all that being said, I get your point. I agree with your point. I think all the judges think that the best path forward is to get people services. Now, some people won't be successful. Some people will reject it. Some people will not show up for testing. And those people would probably be the more likely, in my estimation, would be the people that we need to be concerned about for bail jumping. They don't actually show up to test. But people who test and test positive because they're an addict, I think those people need to get services unless there's really no other course. So that's a long answer. I'm sorry.
Maybe I can just fill in one blank too. And that is, previously we had a day report center. The day report center was a law enforcement model. Sheriff's deputies conducted the testing, and when there was a violation of, or a positive test, they would refer it up for a bail jump to the district attorney's office. Well, I understand wholeheartedly what you're saying, Supervisor Tomczyk. With a justice services department, we're shifting that from a law enforcement model to a civilian model. And that's where Susan Caparelli comes in. So the plan is to have a model that doesn't just refer people for bail jumps and add on more criminal charges, makes more work, more expense for everybody, but gets them to Department of Health and Human Services so they can get some help so that the cycle doesn't continue. This is a good segue into your work.
Wow. So I don't have a lot to say on top of all that. I don't think I could be even more profound and succinct to couple that. But as a new employee, some 2 months in, to a fledgling, ever-evolving department with several programs all coming under one umbrella, that's new, that's change. So in this annual report, I did try to provide some deference to the past and the work of Mike O'Keefe and certainly Judge Needham and the whole CJCC and everybody collaborating and coming together, because I believe quite passionately, actually, that that work of the past is what has enabled the foundation for this department, for justice services, to kind of emulate not only what many counties across the state, but across the nation are doing, and how we're approaching legal issues and criminal offenses and human capacity to change and that trajectory and what we do. I don't have a lot to say about the annual report. I do want to let you know, because there's been a lot of conversation about the DRC and the Day Report Center, and how I've been working with 2 staff, essentially, for the past month and a half. And I think that we've come to a place where I can firmly say, and Judge Nordstrand kind of touched upon it, that we are at a point now that we have transferred everything from the Sheriff's Department to a civilian-run, fully capacity-driven, able, I don't know what you want to call it. We call it the Justice Support Center, quite frankly. And I hope you embrace that notion, because to us and to piggyback what the judges have already said, it is a foundation for addressing public safety, getting people the help they need at the same time. So we have 2 staff. We have transferred everything in our data system over from the Sheriff's Department. Shelby Hilden was a deputy in the Sheriff's Department. She's now the coordinator of that entire Justice Support Center. I hope you embrace the name, because I am pushing it. Tina Sitz has been transferred from one aspect in the county to a full-time compass assessing / pretrial assessor. She happens to be one of the only people in this county that do what she does, and she does it well, and she does it quite rapidly. That information, as the judges said, goes up to the judges, and it provides that information of how to support or how to address each individual. It is person-centered. Every single person will get an assessment. That assessment goes up. Those decisions are made from there. We are fully capable. I have a contract with Premier Biotech to provide drug testing or swab testing. We're also, thanks to, and I have to shout out to, again, Shelby Hilden and Tina Sitz, because they've been driving and supporting and moving this all forward. That's 2 people doing, I can't even describe how much work. And I also have to say that the support from the judiciary is incredible. We've transferred all the systems, protocols, bond language. The judges now have in their desktops referral forms, a format, a matrix, how to address each and every person-centered case, okay? We're a work in progress. We definitely need more staff. I'm proud of the CJCC of the past, the work of the treatment court of the past, the diversion programs. I have to tell you, working in 3 different counties, that this county, it's my county, has some of the best programs in the state. I've been around, and we really do, and that's due to a lot of the support that comes from this group.
And I want you also to know a little bit about me in that I don't work in a vacuum. I very much welcome the work, the involvement of everybody, and that's why I'm so passionate about the CJCC work. But beyond just the CJCC work of the past, I'm also a doer. And Judge Needham has mentioned in numerous CJCC meetings that he wants to take the CJCC and advance it into a working model where each of the subcommittees are actually energized and engaged in working on these programs, connecting to Bob Rare, to connecting all of these aspects in our county. And that takes all of you. I welcome you to the meeting next week, the CJCC. It's my first full meeting of the CJCC on the 16th at 8 a.m. Roy Schoberg will be presenting our CASA program, which is over 2 years in the making. Very proud of that. And we'll also be having a presentation by Professor Phil Gawley, who will present some information about treatment court and where we've been, where we're at, and where he projects us going. So I invite you to any of that. I also invite you into my office. The door is unlocked. It's always open. It's one of the few in the county. And come and talk with me. I would appreciate getting to know each one of you and your desires for this county. So that's all I have.
Supervisor Hanson?
Thank you. That's a good presentation. I would like to reinforce what I said at the public protection meeting the other day, that we're putting a lot of money into this department and it looks like it's in good hands, but what I've asked for is a measure of how we're going to measure success. And I heard you, Judge Waterman, that you can't measure a negative, but I would counter that the supposition on which this entire experiment is based is measuring a negative. We know that we will keep the streets safer if we take these people off of them, is assuming that they won't be doing something that's against the public interest while they're on this program, which is also assuming negative, a negative. We can't prove that because it's not happening. So therefore, help me measure your success. Something needs to be offered that says, this is what we did and it is good, so that I can justify the several $100,000 that we're not spending on other programs in your office. Please.
And I am a data-driven person. I am also a financial person, and I know that all the work that we do earlier on in the system will save this taxpayers' money. It will save the system a lot of work, certainly the judiciary and the circuit court, clerk of court. And I believe in providing a data picture. Are we there yet? No, but we can. We could show failure to appear. We could show days diverted from jail. We could show the opposite of that. We could show success in appearance. We could show folks that are coming off of monitoring, so weekly visits. We could show that success rate. We could show the success in connections to programs and their success rate there. We can show the negatives, and that's public safety too, but we can also show the positives of what we are doing. And that is my intention. Any kind of pre-trial services, any kind of program out there, I think that's, how could you not want to have that presentation? Because how do I know if what I'm doing is working? So that's a determination of mine. That's a priority of mine. I don't want to just be spinning our wheels. So that's a commitment. We're not there yet, but it is on my agenda.
Thank you, and I don't mean to frustrate you. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't dismiss that request entirely. And I'm not looking for it.
Heard you loud and clear
Not
Tuesday
looking for it, immediately. But it's not something that I'm hoping that we don't just dismiss. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Thank you. And Clerk of Court to be the next report. Christie?
Good evening. I am Christy Severson, Clerk of Court. Thank you for having me present my 2020 annual report. A written copy was submitted and should be part of your agenda. I'm just going to give a few highlights. The first highlight and my proudest accomplishment for 2020 was the success of our Wisconsin State Debt Collection Program success. What we are allowed to do based on our participation in this is we turn over debts that are due not only the county, but the state and our victims for restitution. Through 2020, we collected $340,000, just over $340,000. Already through 2021, we've already exceeded that amount with the September check of $60,000, so we're out at $398,000 plus. Since December of 2018, when we started this program, we are at $898,000, almost $900,000. I told my staff if they reached $1 million, there'd be a bonus. Almond bars is one of their biggest things that they enjoy, but I can't give enough credit to my financial team of Jamie Foley, Cheryl Harmon, and Jessica Larson on a great job. They have to endure a lot of intense phone calls from individuals saying, how can you levy my taxes? How can you levy my bank accounts for fines that are past due for multiple years? We were able to do it, and I can't be prouder of those people. Another process that we've enhanced in our department is a training protocol, which starts from new employee through their term of service in my department. We have cross-training schedules. We've created skills checklists for each division, and as each person meets those, is able to perform all the duties within that division, they can move up our succession plan. And so what we've created is a court clerk 2 position, and that way when they have to be employed for 4 years within our department and master at least 3 divisions. That takes a little bit longer for some, but most of them are motivated enough that within 4 years they can get that court clerk 2 position, move up 1 pay grade, and the success for the county, for our people that we serve, is beneficial. We have just that much more knowledge within our department. And I'm proud to announce that 2 employees reached that status in 2020, and that was Kathy Kittle and Greta Lindebauer. Like everyone else, every other department, we dealt with the changing landscape brought on by the pandemic. Multiple committees were formed, procedures, processes, protocols changed frequently, sometimes daily, sometimes hourly, and my staff stepped up to that challenge. In order to keep everyone safe, which includes jurors and includes individuals coming into court, and keeping things as seamless as possible. We started a little bit at reduced hours and reduced staffing. We moved to some staffing, full hours, and then some remote, some in person, and now we're back to mostly all in person, and my staff did a great job of mastering multiple technological systems and updates, as you heard about a little bit earlier. Zoom, Crestron, Polycom, DAR, digital audio recording, Daycast, all things that we knew not a lot about, but we are all now experts, and I can't give enough kudos to my staff working with the judges and getting all that going. I also want to thank, just like Judge Waterman did, John Allegro and his staff, as well as Jim Ellsbury and their staff. They helped us with so many different things. We couldn't have done it without them. And my staff and their troubleshooting was awesome, and I couldn't be prouder. So, as proud as I am of my staff, we're not always able to retain our staff like we'd like to in my department. So I've asked for 2 additional staff for 2022. The court commissioner, the judges are all designated a court clerk for the most part. And those relationships are very important to not only the judiciary, but also to us. And we also have 2 court commissioners who have near to full-time calendars as well, but we do not have dedicated staff for those commissioners. Now, saying a person is a dedicated court clerk doesn't mean that is all they do. Trust me, they all have to do divisional work. I said we had 10 divisions. Court clerk is only one division. So while they are doing their court clerking, they also have other responsibilities within the other divisions. And with the number of cases that are now being heard by the commissioners, it is very hard to keep pulling people out of their divisional work in order to clerk for the commissioners. We do it. Trust me, we do it, and we do it well, for the most part. We do our best. But it is putting in additional constraints on my staff and them able to complete their daily, what else they need to do. Also, you've heard about the increase in the criminal caseload. That's impacting us. All of the, the more cases we are, the more the workload is for everybody. And the last time we added any staff to the clerk of court office was a half-time position back in 2014. We had already had a part-time person, we made them full-time. Before that, we hadn't added any staff since 2007. And that one of them was an enforcement clerk, which is now our collection clerk, who, as I've said earlier, has been doing a fantastic job. The other was for when we created branch 4. And so every time there's a new branch that's created, when we got our 4th judge, we needed a courtroom clerk for that person. So that was the reason that position was added. Staff retention, like I said a little bit earlier, is a challenge. I lost 4 of my 12 courtroom clerks in a month and a half from May to July of this year. The reasons were all varied for leaving. They all, 2 of them were very much long-term employees. The other 2 were about at the 2-year mark. But all of those had a great impact and left a great void in my department. Recruitment has been difficult. I've only hired, we had 1 person start in July. We just got notified as of Friday that we're going to have a 2nd person starting on September 20th. And I'm in the process of working on the 3rd opening, and I have no applicants at all for my 4th opening. So here we are 3 months later, 4 months later, and we'll be down 1. So I know it sounds kind of weird to ask for additional staff when I can't fill this staff, but I really need everyone, and everyone has pitched in and done their best, and I can't be prouder of them. We want to thank all the departments that we work with collaboratively, judges and judicial assistants, the register and probate and staff, court commissioners, child support, corp counsel, sheriff's department, IT, register of deeds, pretty much everybody. We all work together. We all do our best to help each other out whenever we can. I want to thank the county board and administration for all their support over the years. It's very much appreciated. And most importantly, to thank my staff for their tireless work, commitment, and dedication, and passion for their jobs. And as the judges did, I will also invite you. You want to sit next to a clerk and see how things work in court or work on, small claims court, feel free to come up. Also jury. I can't tell you who's going to be selected for jury. It is random, but yes, jury is also under my umbrella. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? None? I'd just like to say thank you to all the judicial group tonight. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the business items and requests for future agenda items. Supervisor Tino.
We've received a lot of emails regarding the local municipalities wanting to have the county declare a sanctuary Second Amendment county for St. Croix. I'd like to put that on the agenda for next month so that as a county we can do it as a whole and then the municipalities don't have to do it on their own.
And Corp Counsel, he's not there to address it. Yeah. Would you care to address that, please? Legality.
Well, I'm familiar with
the type of resolution that is. I think it's largely symbolic. And, I mean, if they want it on the board's agenda, they can have it, but I've looked at it and I don't know the purpose of the resolution other than being symbolic. I would refer it to public protection. If
Okay, I'll refer that request to public protection for review. Any other agenda requests?
Thank you.
None, seeing none. Next will be county clerk's report of correspondence.
Just a quick reminder, I guess, to those who are attending the WCA conference, you'll be receiving information from me. So be patient. It's the end of the month, so you'll be getting it probably closer the week before.
Okay, and announcements?
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Fiedler, go ahead.
One, I want to join in your remarks that you made earlier about the judicial folks that were here today. They are just outstanding. And you can only imagine, fellow supervisors, what our meetings at the Public Protection and Judiciary Committee are like when we have these outstanding people come before us every month with their various issues. It is really dynamic. And add to that the medical examiner and child protection, and it is really, you can tell they are very, very busy on our behalf. But on an announcement, I want to bring to our attention that on Tuesday of next week, the 14th, kind of in conjunction with the district attorney and Supervisor Osnes and HHS, we are holding an elder abuse conference at Faith Community Church, across the street basically. We'll have Judge Vlack, we'll have the sheriff, we'll have financial experts from the banking and securities world, we'll have county employees who specialize in elder abuse, representative of the faith community, Reverend Ramstead, and the district attorney will be making presentations. I'll be doing a lot of the moderation. Supervisor Osnes will be doing moderation. And I think what this will bring to the attention of the people of the county, the scope of this problem, which is huge. And we have about 16% of our county are senior citizens. And there's a variety of abuses that they're subject to, and we just hope to bring a spotlight to that and to help those folks and the folks that support them. Thank you.
Okay, any other announcements? Seeing none, I'll adjourn this meeting at 7:47. Thank you.